Ethan stood outside the steel gates of the military outpost, the wind of the barren colony sweeping dust against his boots. He had waited for this day, his so-called reward day, since the first moment he signed his service papers. Every soldier in his unit had whispered about it. How after the long years of duty, after the endless patrols and battles, they would be given something special. Some were given rare alien pets, creatures that glowed softly at night or sang strange songs. Others were given weapons or small fortunes of credits. Ethan was told he would finally receive his gift. And in his mind, he imagined a pet, something alive but harmless, something to remind him that he was more than just a soldier. The officer at the gate gave him a short nod, eyes filled with a kind of uneasy smile. "Go inside, private," the officer muttered. "Your prize is waiting." Ethan felt a twinge of excitement and confusion, his heart beating faster. The hallway smelled of oil and recycled air, and the flickering lights above cast strange shadows on the walls. As he walked deeper into the chamber, he saw a group of officers standing near a tall metal crate, their faces half hidden by the glow of the overhead lamps. The crate hissed, steam curling from its seams. Ethan felt his pulse jump. This was at the moment he imagined a small, soft animal stepping out, something he could hold, something that would make him feel human again after years of killing. But when the crate doors opened, silence filled the chamber. There was no animal, no harmless gift. Instead, a girl stepped out. She looked about his age, maybe younger, her skin pale but shining faintly like moonlight, her long silver hair falling across her shoulders. Her eyes glowed an unnatural shade of violet, and around her wrist was a band of metal that hummed with a low energy. Ethan froze, unsure whether to step forward or back. The soldiers around him exchanged nervous glances, some smirking, others shifting uncomfortably. The girl looked straight at Ethan, her eyes holding his as if she had known him forever. She took a step closer and whispered in perfect English, her voice soft but echoing strangely. "I belong to you now." Ethan's mouth went dry. This wasn't a pet. This wasn't a prize. This was a person, or something close to it. He turned to the officers, his voice sharp. "What is this? What are you giving me?" One officer laughed, but the sound carried no humor. "Congratulations, Private. This is your gift." Another leaned closer to Ethan, whispering low, "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to." The girl remained silent, her gaze never leaving him. Ethan felt the weight of the moment press down on him, confusion mixing with unease. Why would they give him a girl? Why her? He noticed the silver band on her wrist again, its faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Something told him it wasn't decoration, it was control. The soldiers slowly left the chamber, leaving Ethan and the girl alone. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the band. Ethan forced himself to speak. "What's your name?" The girl tilted her head slightly, her silver hair brushing her shoulders. "They call me Lyra," she said simply. Ethan frowned. The name rolled easily off her tongue, too easily for someone who had just stepped out of a sealed crate. "Do you know me?" he asked, his voice trembling with confusion. Lyra nodded slowly. "I was told to know you, to follow you, to stay with you." Ethan stepped back, the walls of the chamber suddenly feeling closer. This wasn't right. This wasn't what he wanted. He wanted a companion, not a slave, not some strange experiment wrapped in human skin. But as he looked at Lyra, he saw no fear in her eyes, no hatred, no sadness, only a calm acceptance, as if she had lived this moment before. That disturbed him even more. He remembered the way the officers had looked at him, the nervous smiles, the warning whispers. Something about this was bigger than him, bigger than his reward. He tried to shake off the thought, but unease gnawed at him like teeth in the dark. Finally, he said, "I don't want this. I don't want you to be my prize." Lyra's expression did not change, her voice soft. "It is not about what you want, Ethan. It is about what is meant to be." The lights flickered above them. The hum of the band grew louder, and for the first time, Ethan felt the cold grip of fear crawl up his spine. Whatever this gift was, it was no gift at all. It was a secret a test, a danger wrapped in human form. And now it was his, whether he wanted it or not. Ethan did not sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the girl who sat quietly in the corner of his quarters. Lyra did not move much. She simply sat with her hands folded on her lap, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Every time Ethan looked away, he felt her gaze still on him, not cold, not hostile, but heavy, like she was watching his every breath. The outpost was never silent. Machines hummed, engines roared in the distance, soldiers talked in the halls. But tonight, Ethan only heard the slow rhythm of his own heartbeat. Finally, he forced himself to speak. "You don't have to sit there like that." Lyra tilted her head slightly, her silver hair catching the light. "Where should I sit then?" Ethan rubbed his forehead, frustration mixing with confusion. "Anywhere. Just don't act like you're waiting for orders. I'm not your master." Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "But I was told you were my anchor." The word struck him like a blade. Anchor? What does that even mean? Lyra looked at the floor, as if searching for the right words. "Without you, I drift, I break, I lose myself." Her voice carried no emotion, but Ethan felt the truth of it, the way her band hummed softly whenever she spoke. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but deep inside, something told him she believed it completely. The following days only deepened the mystery. Lyra stayed close to him wherever he went, silent as a shadow. If Ethan walked through the mess hall, she followed. If he patrolled the outer fences, she walked behind him, her presence unnoticed by others yet impossible for him to ignore. What unsettled him most was how quickly she adapted. She understood the language of the soldiers, learned their routines, and even moved with the discipline of trained fighters. But there was no training, no lessons. She simply absorbed everything she saw. One evening, while Ethan worked on a broken scanner, Lyra spoke suddenly. "You are fixing it wrong." He frowned. "Excuse me?" She stepped closer, her eyes flickering faintly. "The circuit is reversed. If you connect the wires like that, it will fail again in 1 hour." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know that?" "I just know," she said softly, then touched the machine lightly. The scanner hummed back to life, perfectly stable. Ethan stared at her, unease growing deeper. "How do you know things you shouldn't?" he asked. Lyra met his eyes. "Because what you know, I know." The words chilled him. He began to notice it more. Sometimes she finished his sentences before he spoke. Sometimes she answered questions he had only thought in his head. At first he dismissed it as coincidence, but soon it became impossible to ignore. Lyra was inside his mind, not fully, but enough to sense his feelings, his doubts, his fears. One night, Ethan tried to test it. He sat silently in his quarters and thought, "Don't speak." Lyra looked at him and smiled faintly, saying nothing. Then he thought harder, "Say the word star." Lyra whispered, "Star," her voice almost a breath. Ethan's skin crawled. This was no pet, no companion. This was something bound to him in ways he could not understand. Yet, as much as it disturbed him, part of him felt strangely comforted. He had lived among soldiers for years, surrounded by noise, violence, and orders, but no one had ever truly seen him. No one had ever truly listened. Lyra did, even when he wished she didn't. Her presence was terrifying, but also human, and that contradiction pulled him deeper into the mystery. Still, there were warnings he could not ignore. One officer, an older man with scars across his face, pulled Ethan aside one morning. "Keep your distance, boy," the officer muttered, his voice low. "That thing isn't yours. It isn't anyone's." Ethan frowned. "Then why give her to me?" The officer's eyes darkened. "Because they want to see what happens. They want to see how long before she breaks you." Before Ethan could ask more, the man walked away, leaving only fear in his heart. That night, Ethan confronted Lyra again. "Tell me the truth," he demanded, his fists clenched. "What are you really? Why are you here?" Lyra's violet eyes glowed brighter, the band on her wrist pulsing like a living heart. She whispered, "I don't know who made me. I don't know why they gave me to you. I only know this. Without you, I cannot exist." Her voice was filled with certainty, but behind it, Ethan heard something else, a shadow of sorrow, maybe even fear. And in that moment, he realized something terrible. She might be more afraid of him leaving than he was of her staying. The bond between them was no simple chain of command. It was something deeper, something dangerous. And whether he wanted it or not, Ethan was already caught inside it. The outpost was quiet most days, but lately, strange things had started to happen. It began small, a flicker in the lights, a brief shutdown in the comm system, a weapon locker refusing to open. The soldiers laughed it off at first, blaming old circuits and cheap maintenance. But Ethan noticed something else. Every time one of these failures happened, Lyra was close by. He didn't want to believe it. He told himself it was just coincidence. But then, one evening during his patrol shift, the defense turrets on the north wall powered down all at once. The system was supposed to be impossible to hack from inside, yet it went silent in seconds. And when Ethan turned around, he found Lyra standing in the shadows, her violet eyes glowing faintly. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice tight. Lyra shook her head slowly. "I didn't break them, but I can feel when things fail." Her words didn't ease him. He wanted to trust her, but trust was difficult when machines kept dying in her presence. The officers began to whisper too. Ethan caught pieces of conversations as he passed. "She's unstable. Dangerous to keep here. They should have ended her program months ago." When he asked for details, no one gave answers, only warnings. Even his closest bunkmate, Harrow, avoided the subject, muttering, "The less you know, the safer you'll be." But Ethan was already too deep in it. He could not ignore the way Lyra lingered near him, the way she seemed to know his thoughts. And he could not ignore the dreams. At first, they were only flashes. Fire across a black sky, alien ruins buried in ash, soldiers running and screaming. But soon the dreams grew longer, more detailed. He saw armies clashing, heard voices in a language he did not know, and felt the ground shake beneath titanic machines of war. When he woke, sweat poured from his face, and Lyra was always there, sitting silently beside his bed, as if waiting. "Those aren't just dreams, are they?" he asked her one night. Lyra's voice was soft. "They are memories, but not only mine." Ethan's chest tightened. "Whose then?" She lowered her gaze. "I don't know. Maybe those who came before me. Maybe those who made me." The way she said it chilled him. It was as if she wasn't a person with one life, but a vessel carrying countless echoes. The next morning, the commander of the outpost summoned Ethan. He stood in the command chamber, the walls filled with screens showing maps and data streams. The commander's sharp eyes studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You've noticed things, haven't you?" Ethan stayed quiet, unsure how much to reveal. The commander leaned forward, his voice low. "She isn't a prize, private. She's an experiment, and experiments don't always end well." Ethan wanted to ask more, but the meeting ended quickly. As he left, the commander's last words echoed in his head. "If you're smart, you'll keep your distance. If you're loyal, you'll report every move she makes." But Ethan didn't feel loyal in that moment. He felt trapped, because he knew reporting Lyra would mean her end. And despite the warnings, despite the fear, a part of him didn't want her destroyed. That evening, another failure struck the outpost. The encrypted database went dark, its files corrupted beyond repair. Technicians scrambled, alarms blared, and in the chaos, Ethan found Lyra again, standing calmly near the glowing screens. He rushed to her, grabbing her arm. "Tell me the truth. Are you doing this?" Her violet eyes met his, and for the first time he saw something like pain in them. "I don't mean to," she whispered. "It just happens when I'm near. I can't stop it." The hum of the band on her wrist grew louder, pulsing like a heartbeat. Ethan felt the vibration through his hand, and for a brief second, he saw another flash. A ruined world, burning skies, a voice screaming his name, even though it wasn't his world, wasn't his time. He staggered back, breath sharp in his chest. Lyra looked at him with sorrow. "Now you see, the danger is not what I do, Ethan, the danger is what I carry inside." The alarm still screamed in the background, soldiers shouting as systems crashed around them. But Ethan only heard her words. The whispers were true. Lyra wasn't just a gift gone wrong. She was something far more dangerous. And for reasons he didn't yet understand, she was tied to him. Ethan could no longer ignore the whispers. The outpost had turned restless. Soldiers spoke in low voices, eyes shifting toward him whenever Lyra passed by. She was no longer just his gift. She had become a shadow over the whole camp, a question no one dared to answer. And the more he tried to keep his distance, the more he felt her presence drawing him in. One night, unable to sleep, Ethan slipped into the records chamber. The place was locked, guarded by digital codes, but after years of service, he had learned a trick or two. He told himself it was only curiosity, but in truth, it was desperation. He needed to know what Lyra really was, why she had been given to him. The terminal screen glowed blue as he typed in stolen access codes, his hands trembling. At first, nothing, then lines of restricted files opened like a wound. The words on the screen made his blood run cold. Project Lyra, Weapon Prototype 07. He scrolled further, reading reports that spoke of genetic experiments, alien DNA spliced with human hosts. She wasn't born. She was engineered, created in a lab under strict control. Every file carried notes of failure. Earlier versions had collapsed, burned out, or turned violent. Only Prototype 07 survived. And then Ethan found the line that hit hardest. Subject requires anchor host to stabilize psychic resonance. Without anchor, subject becomes unstable and destructive. Anchor host. That was him. They had chosen him not as a reward, not as a lucky soldier, but as a test subject, a shield to see how long she would last before breaking. His fists tightened, anger boiling in his chest. They hadn't given him a gift. They had handed him a ticking bomb and called it loyalty. He turned suddenly, sensing movement. Lyra stood in the doorway, her violet eyes calm but unreadable. "You weren't supposed to see those files," she whispered. Ethan's heart pounded. "So it's true? You're a weapon, not a girl, not even a person?" Lyra's face did not change, but her voice carried quiet pain. "I did not choose to be made this way." The silence between them was heavy. Ethan wanted to scream, to curse the officers, to push her away. But when he looked at her, he saw no monster, no weapon, only someone who never asked to exist. And that thought unsettled him more than the files. "Why me?" Ethan asked finally, his voice rough. "Why anchor me?" Lyra stepped closer, her silver hair brushing her shoulders, the glow of her wristband faint but steady. "I don't know," she said softly. "When they woke me, they told me your name. They told me I belonged to you. And when I saw you, the bond was already there." Her eyes met his, steady and deep. "I feel what you feel, Ethan. When you are afraid, I tremble. When you are angry, I burn. That is what an anchor is." Ethan backed away, his chest tight. It was too much. The files, the truth, the weight of being tied to something beyond his control. He wanted to reject it, to walk out of the chamber and never look back. But the hum of her band grew louder, vibrating through the air, and again he saw flashes. Cities in flames, ships falling from the skies, armies breaking apart under alien fire. And in the middle of it all, Lyra, screaming, burning, breaking apart, until only silence remained. The vision ended as quickly as it came, leaving Ethan gasping. Lyra touched his arm gently, her voice almost pleading. "Do you see now? If I lose you, I lose myself, and maybe more than myself." Ethan pulled his arm back, his mind spinning. He had come looking for answers, but the truth was worse than any guess. The officers hadn't trusted him. They had used him. And Lyra, she wasn't a pet. She wasn't a reward. She was the heart of something much larger, something dangerous. And somehow, he was the only thing holding it together. When Ethan left the chamber, the files still burning in his memory, he felt eyes on him from the shadows. The officers knew. Maybe they had always known he would look. And now, He understood their whispers, their warnings. This wasn't about trust or loyalty anymore. It was about survival. His, Lyra's, and maybe everyone else's. The days after Ethan uncovered the truth felt heavier. Every corner of the outpost seemed sharper. Every glance from the officers more suspicious. He knew now why they had placed Lyra in his hands, not as a gift, but as a test. A weapon hidden inside a girl, bound to him like shadow to flame. He tried to keep distance, tried to see her as just a burden, but it was impossible. She followed him quietly, her violet eyes steady, her presence constant. No matter how far he walked, she was there like the pull of gravity. Then the attack came. It was sudden. Alarms howled across the outpost, sirens flashing red against the steel walls. Raiders, armed and ruthless, had broken through the perimeter. Blaster fire echoed. Soldiers rushed to their stations, but the enemy numbers were too many. Ethan grabbed his rifle and ran toward the defense wall, his training guiding his steps. But before he could reach the front line, Lyra was beside him, silent and calm. "You stay back," Ethan ordered. "This isn't your fight." Lyra tilted her head, her band glowing brighter. "Your fight is mine." The wall shook as explosions lit up the night sky. Raiders stormed forward, their weapons tearing through defenses. Ethan fired until his rifle overheated, sweat stinging his eyes. And then, in the chaos, he saw it, a raider charging him with a blade raised high. Ethan braced, too slow to block. But the blow never came. A pulse of light burst from Lyra, a wave of energy that threw the raider backward like a rag doll. Her eyes burned with violet fire, the band on her wrist glowing like molten metal. She raised her hand, and the air itself seemed to bend. Weapons twisted, armor cracked. Enemies fell screaming. Ethan froze, his rifle useless in his hands, as Lyra stood like a storm given shape. When the battle ended, silence fell heavy. Dozens of raiders lay broken on the ground, not by bullets, not by grenades, but by her. The soldiers stared, some in awe, others in terror. Ethan could hear the whispers already. "Did you see what she did? She's not human. We can't control that." Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Do you understand now?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Understand what?" "That I am bound to you," she said softly. "Without you, I cannot focus, but with you, I can fight." The words unsettled him. He thought of the files, the line that said she required an anchor. He thought of the vision he had seen, burning worlds, endless war. And yet, as much as fear gripped him, there was something else inside, a spark of connection he couldn't deny. That night, as the soldiers repaired the walls and carried away the wounded, Ethan sat with Lyra in the quiet of his quarters. She had saved his life and the lives of many others. But the officers were no longer whispering. They were watching, planning. Ethan knew it. He could feel the shift in the air. "You didn't have to fight," he told her, his voice low. Lyra looked down at her hands, the faint glow still lingering. "If I hadn't, you would be gone." Ethan shook his head, torn between anger and gratitude. "You're more dangerous than all of them. You know that?" She met his gaze, her voice steady. "Yes, but only if I lose you." Her words sank deep into him. For the first time, he realized this bond was not just about survival. It was about trust, about choice. And whether he liked it or not, he was beginning to trust her. Still, in the shadows of the camp, he heard the commander's voice echo in memory. "She's an experiment. Experiments don't always end well." Ethan knew the officers had seen her power, and now they would never let her go free. The bond between them was no longer a secret. It was a weapon the military wanted to control. But as Ethan looked at Lyra, sitting across from him in silence, he knew one thing with certainty. She wasn't a weapon to him. She was a person, and she had chosen to stand beside him. And if the military wanted to use her, they would have to go through him first. The outpost was never the same after the raid. Soldiers whispered less, but their eyes spoke louder whenever Lyra walked past. She had saved them all, yet the silence around her was not gratitude. It was fear. And fear was dangerous, Ethan knew. Orders came quickly. Lyra was no longer allowed to wander freely. Guards shadowed her every step. She was not in chains, but everyone could see the invisible prison tightening. Ethan felt it too. The air was heavier, the walls seemed closer, and trust was fading fast. One evening, Ethan was called to the commander's office. The room smelled of metal and dust, the commander's sharp eyes locking onto him. "You've done well, Private," the commander said, voice calm but cold. "You've proven her value." Ethan stayed quiet, his fists clenched at his sides. The commander leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Now the real work begins. We're transferring her to Central. They'll study her there, break her apart if they must. But from her, we'll make an army." The words cut through Ethan like a blade. "Study her?" he repeated, anger rising in his chest. "She's not a machine. She's not a girl either," the commander interrupted, his tone sharp. "Don't fool yourself, Private. She is property. She belongs to the program, not to you." Ethan left the office with his heart pounding. He could still hear the commander's words echoing in his head. She belongs to the program. But when he returned to his quarters, he found Lyra waiting, her eyes filled with something he had never seen before. Fear. "They're going to take me, aren't they?" she whispered. Ethan sat heavily on the bunk, his voice rough. "Yes." She looked at him, desperate. "And you? Will you let them?" The question struck deeper than any order. Ethan had sworn loyalty to the military. He had given years of his life to it. But sitting there, staring at the girl who had saved him, who had bound herself to him without choice, he knew the truth. If he stayed loyal to command, Lyra would be destroyed. If he broke loyalty, he would become a traitor. That night, he made his choice. The transfer was scheduled at dawn. Armed guards surrounded the landing pad. A transport ship waiting with its engines humming low. Lyra walked between them, silent, her wristband glowing faintly. Ethan marched beside her, rifle slung across his back, his face a mask. No one suspected what he was about to do. When they reached the ramp, Ethan moved. With a swift motion, he slammed his rifle into the nearest guard, knocking him to the ground. Chaos exploded, shouts filling the air, weapons raised. Lyra's eyes flared with violet fire as the band pulsed like thunder, waves of energy knocking soldiers back. Together they fought through the confusion. Ethan firing precise shots, Lyra breaking weapons and walls with invisible force. For the first time, they weren't soldier and weapon, handler and experiment. They were partners fighting side by side. The commander's voice roared over the comms. "Stop them. Do not let them escape." But it was too late. Ethan and Lyra sprinted toward the outer gates, alarms screaming across the outpost. Every step felt heavier, every choice final. There was no turning back now. Outside the walls, the wasteland stretched endless and dark. They had no map, no plan, only the will to run. Behind them, lights blazed and engines roared as soldiers gave chase. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her forward, his breath sharp. "Keep moving," he said, his voice steady despite the fear burning inside. Lyra's eyes met his, her voice soft but certain. "As long as you hold me, I will not fall." The ground shook as gunfire lit the night. Explosions painted the sky red, the outpost unleashing everything it had to stop them. But Ethan didn't stop, and neither did Lyra. Together, they vanished into the wasteland, hunted, branded traitors. Behind them, the only life Ethan had ever known crumbled into ash. Ahead of them, only uncertainty. But in that uncertainty, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, freedom. And he knew, as long as Lyra was with him, he would fight for it, no matter the cost. The wasteland stretched endlessly before them. Broken rocks, black sand, and skies heavy with clouds of dust. Ethan and Lyra moved through it like shadows, hunted by the army that had once called him soldier. Every night, the horizon lit with searchlights and gunships, their engines growling like predators in the dark. And every night they ran. At first, Ethan thought the chase would end quickly. that the military would give up after a few days. But he had underestimated the truth. They weren't hunting him. They were hunting her. Lyra was too valuable, too dangerous to let go. And as long as he was with her, they would never stop. One night, under the broken skeleton of an old mining tower, Ethan caught his breath, his hands raw from climbing jagged rocks. Lyra sat beside him, quiet, her violet eyes dim in the moonless night. "You're tired," she said softly. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "We've been running for days. Of course I'm tired." Lyra tilted her head, studying him with strange calm. "You could leave me, you know. If you do, they might let you live." Ethan turned sharply, his voice fierce. "Don't ever say that. I'm not leaving you." Silence lingered, broken only by the wind. Lyra lowered her gaze, and for the first time, Ethan saw something fragile in her expression. Not power, not mystery, but fear. She whispered, "Then we fight together." The fight came sooner than either expected. At dawn, the roar of engines filled the wasteland, sand whipping into the air as armored transports surrounded the ruins. Dozens of soldiers poured out, rifles gleaming, orders shouted. And behind them, the commander himself, his eyes locked on Ethan with cold fury. "It didn't have to be this way," the commander shouted across the field. "Hand her over, and I'll spare your life. Stand against us, and you'll die a traitor." Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle, his voice steady. "I was your soldier once. But soldiers fight for people, not for cages. I won't hand her over." The commander's face hardened, his hand raising. "Then you die with her." The battlefield exploded. Blaster fire tore through the air, the ruins shaking with every shot. Ethan fired back, his aim sharp, moving between shattered walls. But it was Lyra who turned the tide. Her eyes blazed violet, the band on her wrist glowing like fire. Energy surged through the battlefield. Weapons bent, armor cracked, soldiers thrown aside as if the earth itself had rejected them. Yet the more she fought, the more unstable she became. Ethan felt it in his chest, the bond pulling tighter, every surge of her power burning through his body like flame. He realized with horror what the files had meant. Without him, she would collapse, and with him, she might burn them both out. Still, he refused to let go. "Focus on me," he shouted, running through the storm of light. "Don't lose yourself, Lyra. Look at me." Her gaze snapped to his, the chaos slowing, her breath ragged. Through the smoke and fire, she whispered, "You're my anchor. Without you, I fall." Ethan's heart pounded, but his voice was firm. "Then hold on. We're not weapons, Lyra. We're not tools. We fight because we choose to, not because they made us." Something shifted then. Her power steadied, no longer wild, but sharp and controlled. Together, they struck back, not as soldier and experiment, but as two souls bound by trust. The raiders fell, the commander's forces scattered, and the wasteland went quiet except for the crackle of broken machines. The commander, wounded and furious, glared at Ethan across the field. "You've doomed us all," he spat. "That thing will destroy everything one day, and you'll burn with it." Ethan stepped forward, his rifle steady, his voice calm. "She's not a thing. She's a person, and as long as I stand, no one will use her again." The commander fled with the last of his men, leaving only silence behind. Ethan lowered his rifle, turning to Lyra. She stood among the ruins, her eyes still glowing faintly, but softer now, almost human. "You were never meant to own me," she said quietly, her voice carrying through the empty air. "You were meant to free me." Ethan felt the weight of the words settle deep inside. The outpost, the military, his old life, all of it was gone. Ahead lay only uncertainty, exile, and endless pursuit. But for the first time, he did not feel alone. He looked at Lyra and nodded, his voice steady. "Then let's make our own path. Together." And so they walked into the wasteland, fugitives, rebels, partners. Not bound by chains, not driven by orders, but by choice. A choice to fight not for power, not for survival alone, but for something greater. for freedom, and for each other.